today's guest, Robert Uendorn, the head of content at DappRadar and a true play-to-earn guru. How are you doing today, Rob?
Hey Pedro, yeah, great. It's a nice day. Interesting stuff happening in the worldwide metaverse. You just mentioned Bored Apes. They just launched their ape token, so that brings lots of excitement. And yeah, I love this space. So excited to talk about it.
Perfect. Yeah, happy to have you here. So, as always, we will be recording the session for you people to catch up later. And if you miss any of our previous shows, don't worry. We've got you covered as you can get them on DappRadar's YouTube channel. So, let's start things with a little of context. Back in October, around Halloween time, Facebook announced its rebranding to Meta, unveiling its full intention to go all in into the metaverse. As a result, virtual worlds projects like the Sandbox, Decentraland, CryptoVoxels, and many other experienced a rise in the demand. The price of their native cryptos grew exponentially, in some cases reaching 10x, while the value of NFTs representing digital parcels grew significantly as well. The floor price of lands in the Sandbox, for example, grew from zero point 0.8 or 0.9 ETH to almost 5 ETH around December, and has consolidated at the time of recording around 3 ETH. And we all hear discussions about the metaverse and digital lands, but maybe we don't have a full grasp of this concept of digital lands. So, Rob, you're an avid metaverse enthusiast, and you have experience and actually own land across multiple virtual worlds or metaverse platforms. Could you introduce us to this notion of virtual worlds? Which ones are the leaders, and what can you do inside these virtual lands?
I think first and foremost, it's important to look at what the metaverse actually is, right? I mean, yes, it's a virtual world, but to an extent, we can better see it as an extension of our own world. Like, because it's blockchain enabled, it allows people to transfer value, transfer information, transfer ownership, and that really makes the metaverse an extension of our real world. In the same way, a couple of years ago, let's say 2 decades ago, people would frown the moment you would talk about web shops. Like shops on the internet as an extension of physical businesses. Nowadays, physical businesses go out of business, and many shops only exist on the internet. Now, extend that towards the metaverse, where you could say we regain a bit of that physicality in a digital sense. So we are still very early. Like, none of the virtual worlds has true mainstream exposure. Like, there have been some events that attracted a couple of thousand people, maybe 10,000 people, but we have not seen any of the virtual worlds attracting hundreds of thousands or millions of users. So when you talk about land and what's possible, I think we're really at the beginning. And owning land in one of the metaverse is for people that are excited about this space, that are excited about the potential, that perhaps see the possibilities of extending businesses, setting up social experiments with events and maybe music performances, that kind of stuff, or gaming, of course. And like, the metaverse and virtual worlds will grow, and I think it has been pushed forward as well by COVID and the pandemic. That helped a lot. And you mentioned Facebook and Meta. That was also like a cataclysm event that brought lots of attention to the Sandbox, to Decentraland. But I do want to notion that all these virtual worlds, they're not new. Like, they've been in development for 2-3 years. Like, during the 2018 bear market, each of those, so CryptoVoxels, Decentraland, Sandbox, Somnium Space. They were all building with teams, with developers. This has been long in the making. This is not a sudden appearance, a sudden phenomenon. You know the word I want to say, but it's not something that comes out of thin air. This has slowly been growing, and now alongside those four, let's call them premier platforms, a whole bunch of newer platforms have risen. Matrix World that exists on the Flow and Ethereum blockchain. TCG World on Binance Smart Chain, NFT Worlds that uses Minecraft, World Wide Web that takes a more 2D approach, a pixelated approach to everything. So there's something for everybody, and there's all kinds of different platforms these metaverse worlds come into existence on, and it's a very young space. So people listening, when you buy land, sure, it's exciting. Don't buy too early. Like, don't buy into projects that promise something without delivering. Look at projects that are delivering, that are actually launching a product, and check it out. See if you're interested in going in there. But among this wave of metaverse hype, there's also lots of let's call it garbage, and it's difficult to see the difference. But like, there are teams actually building, and there are teams speculating, and that's the danger.
Yeah, and I think this is very similar to what we see in the NFT space, right? Like projects that probably just launch a 10K avatar collection just for the sake of launching and for grabbing some capital, but in the end they never end up accomplishing their goals. So this is also applicable to these metaverse platforms or virtual worlds. And I want to go back a bit because there is something very important that you mentioned, and it's also we've been talking about this when we talk about games, and it's the patience that is required in this space. These projects require time to groom, time to be developed. It's not going to happen from one day to another, and not even from 1 year to the next one. It's something that takes several years in the making because they are constantly upgrading. They need to be sure that when they're launching their platform, it's bug free, because of course these projects are also on top of a digital economy, right? These projects have cryptocurrencies sustaining these virtual realities. Like in the Sandbox, we see the SAM token, and in Decentraland we see Mana, and so on. So there are a few things that need to be very, very sure that they're basically error free, because if not, the results could be not good. And also you mentioned, like, there are let's say different types of virtual worlds. There are business, probably we will get down the line to see more businesses transitioning into the metaverse fully. And we also see gaming platforms and social platforms. And for example, do you see any leader in terms of each category? Like, for example, is Decentraland focusing more on social events, or is it more a gaming platform? Because, for example, the Sandbox, I think it's very clear that it's a play-to-earn platform. Do you see any leaders in that regard?
Now, you're absolutely right. Like, there's a clear difference between a gaming metaverse world and a, let's call it, regular metaverse world. I would argue that Decentraland is a bit more social and event focused, but there's also something that's probably more historical, because they are implementing game mechanics. What is it called? Like a Pokemon type of game. I forgot the name. Okay, I can't think of it right now. But there is a Pokemon-inspired game that used to be a 2D web game, and they're now transitioning into Decentraland. So what I want to say there is that even though Decentraland has the reputation of being a social and event-driven space, they are slowly incorporating more gaming mechanics. And in similar vein, CryptoVoxels has the same. Like CryptoVoxels is also a very event, I would argue even art-driven virtual world. But they're also slowly incorporating elements of interoperability, the ability to program within that virtual world. So they're also becoming more interactive and more gamified. And you're right, like the Sandbox 100% positions itself as a gaming experience with a bit of social to it. But other way around, like the Sandbox, you can also organize events in the Sandbox. So it's not like one thing rules out the other. I think the Sandbox, the Decentraland, Somnium Space, CryptoVoxels, to an extent, they all battling for the same throne. I find it way too early to call any winners. The fact that we talk about these four primarily already positions them somewhat at the top, I'd argue. But there are various other virtual worlds that are super interesting. Matrix World, as I mentioned, TCG World, Substrata. They are all like all 3D worlds, all similar to the four market leaders, and so that's one thing. And what's interesting, like now we talk about metaverse worlds where you can organize events, or where you can showcase your NFTs, or buy a house and organize club evenings, or pub quizzes, or whatever. Often, when you search on the internet for metaverse land, you will also discover 100% gaming-oriented worlds, like Miranda's, or
Axie, probably.
No, Axie Infinity, for example. Like those are also like often when we talk about virtual land, like those are also examples that pop up. But they are of course metaverse, because they are on the blockchain. They are using NFTs. There's a play to earn or an economy mechanic behind it. So they are part of the wider metaverse, but they are very gaming oriented. So they have a their purpose is not to allow you to do everything, but to allow you to work within their ecosystem. While Decentraland and CryptoVoxels, they are different because they allow you to do anything. Like, technically, you can run a game in there, or you can sell virtual versions of your home knitted scarf. No, say, okay, if you buy this NFT scarf, then I will also send you the real scarf. Whatever. No, I'm just making something up right now, but those virtual worlds allow you to do a lot more in terms of creative freedom. And when it's a gaming metaverse world, now you're of course restrained by the rules of the game and the setting of the game, etc.
Yeah, very similar to what we see in the traditional world, like in the case of Minecraft, where you have an engine and basically the imagination is the limit. You can create, we see replicas of Game of Thrones worlds or the Lord of Rings, even Howard's, and basically, imagination is the limit. And now that you were talking about these gaming platforms, I see a timeless avatar in the audience. So Treeverse is also one of those interesting projects building around. Cool. So we're trying to discover which are the factors that are more critical to value virtual worlds. So let's go to the point. We're launching actually today or tomorrow a report, a valuation report for lands in the Sandbox. And if you're a DappRadar Pro user, you will have access immediately. If not, you will have to wait a bit. But interesting insights coming out from this report, and is something that goes in line with what you mentioned earlier, that we are still on a very early stage. Eventually, there will be several factors that will contribute to the valuation of lands, like the type of land, if it entails any utility, and other factor that we are going to talk about later. But right now, I want to focus on a couple of. And basically, in this report, we discovered that as of now, the main two factors that are important to evaluate a virtual land are the size and the location. Yes, in the metaverse, size matters too. And actually, this is a logic that it's very similar to how we evaluate real estate in the physical world. Like, how big is your house and where is it located? It's very similar what we see in metaverse platforms, and in the sandbox is no different. I'm just going to lay down an example of why at this moment location is the most important variable to evaluate a land. And we build a heat map of the highest sales of these NFTs, and a heat map of the average sale prices. And surprisingly, we discovered that plots that were, let's say, 1+1 square, right? An area of 1+1, were sold for a higher price than lands that were 3 by 3, which is a 9 area square, which is way higher. But it's surprising that because my land is next to Snoop Dogg's land, or maybe a renowned name brand, is way more valuable than a big parcel of land, let's say in the far eastern corner. So these are two of the factors that we are seeing right now that are quite important in evaluating lands. But as I said earlier, there are other virtual worlds. There are other factors to take into consideration as the space evolves into a more mature metaverse. So my next question, Rob, is as the metaverse evolves and the virtual worlds mature, which other variables do you see becoming more relevant when evaluating a land?
Sure. Before jumping into that, I would love to discuss a point towards the Snoop Dogg example you gave.
Yeah.
No, like you said, like land next to Snoop Dogg or next to a premier brand, let's say Gucci, right now is considered valuable. But it's pure, like at the moment for the sandbox, it's pure speculative, right? Like the world isn't live yet. Right now they have an alpha test where you can test some games, but the actual world isn't there yet. So all those pricing differentiations are speculative.
Correct.
Now, imagine that Snoop Dogg doesn't build anything on his land. He doesn't build anything, so therefore he doesn't generate traffic. He's a bit lazy. He's doing other things, and suddenly that land will become less valuable because, like, it's valuable because not because you're next to Snoop Dogg, but because the expectation is that Snoop Dogg will drive traffic. And when Snoop Dogg drives traffic, you as a neighbor will also gain traffic, and with that, you probably earn passive income in Sand token.
Yeah, with
So
with traffic, you mean like people like literally walking in their VRs
yeah,
and
yeah,
walking by, right? Okay, cool.
yeah. People visiting your parcel and interacting with what you have to offer. Now, what I personally find super interesting is what will happen when the sandbox goes live, and we're 1-2 years in the future,
Yeah.
and suddenly there will be game designers, game studios, or brands that have land in the sandbox that becomes much more popular than the land owned by Snoop, because like I said, Snoop is lazy. He doesn't renew his content. He doesn't have seasonal content. no, he tends to prefer Decentraland or something like that. And
yeah.
So and suddenly, like, you get a new dynamic, and in the same way as in the real world, when suddenly there's a gas station built next to your house, the value of your house will drop because you live next to a gas station. So in a similar matter, land in the sandbox can also appreciate or lose its value because the neighbors next of you are not or are very active. And I find that a very fascinating concept. But it again, like this is of course pure speculation. The sandbox isn't that far ahead yet. They don't have that part of their world live yet. So, but that's my thoughts on that. Now, looking at other virtual worlds, take CryptoVoxels, take Decentraland, take Somnium Space. Again, they're very land valuation is often very similar to how we value houses in the real world. So if especially commercial locations, by the way. So if you're on a main road in Decentraland, in Decentraland as well, by the way, but in Somnium Space, if you're on a big road, now the parcel tends to be more valuable. Even more so when that particular parcel has a view on the lake. Like, if you don't know the lake, the map of Somnium Space, it's a square map. In the middle of the map, there's a lake. Among the most expensive locations are the parcels that are either located at the lake or have a view over the lake. And of course, again, like, size plays a role, but having a view on the lake drives value of the parcel. And that's a very interesting mechanic. Like, why is that? Like, why do people value a scenery looking over a virtual lake? It is quite odd, but it's interesting. In a similar way, the Decentraland, the Decentraland has been around for quite some time. They launched their open version in February 2020. So they've been around for over 2 years already. They also, in the Decentraland, you can identify hotspots. So there's like particular locations that drives quite a lot of traffic, and in that virtual world, you even start to see that certain brands or certain types of businesses position themselves close to each other. So in the same way that you often have many car shops in the same street in the city where you live, in the Decentraland, it's sort of a similar thing is happening. So, like, geography and the location of a virtual piece of land, even though it seems weird, actually has influence on value, and on the marketplace also want to be there. So the people looking for marketplace content in the Decentraland can visit all those places next to each other. So I find that very fascinating. And if you look at CryptoVoxels, like CryptoVoxels as the main island. Within the main island, there is the center of the main island. It's called Origin City. That's the most expensive. That's also where the buildings or the land plots are the highest. And the more you go to the outskirts of the island, prices drop. Even though, like, prices on the Origin Island are quite high. But what you see on all the other secondary islands, all around the main island, is that land next to adjacent to the sea, or it's a sea. So adjacent to the sea, with a sea view, they tend to be more popular. So they tend to sell for a premium, and that's again that's something because it's pleasing to the eye. not because you can smell the fresh air of the sea, but because it looks pretty. So
yeah,
again, like real world rules for pricing virtual land apply also in the wider metaverse, but the reasoning is often either beauty or traffic.
yeah. Actually, it's fascinating how NFTs in general are very well. You can apply human logic very, very closely, right? Behaviors, patterns, and so on. And in virtual lands, it's the same. And you were talking about Decentraland, and actually, I think the highest virtual land was sold. The highest sale was Decentraland Fashion District, which was sold for more than $2 million. And just imagine in 2 years when Gucci, Dolce & Gabbana, Burberry, Louis Vuitton, instead of going Fashion Week in Milano, they're going Fashion Week in Decentraland. So you will have thousands of avatars. If you have a parcel near the fashion district, you will have thousands of people walking around your virtual parcel. And if you have built an experience, the chances of people monetizing your experience, your construction are higher. That is why this location is so relevant. But again, we're at an early stage. As the industry matures, as the virtual worlds mature, we are going to see more factors that are worth considering when evaluating a virtual land. And I'm going to put an example in, I don't know, like Mirandus or Axie Infinity, right? Because in this type of games, you will mine resources, and depending on the land you've got, you will mine resources at different ratios. So we will start to see more of these factors come into play. Another important one is the partnerships and collaborations. I think the Sandbox is by far the clear leader in that regard. But for example, there are other projects that are starting to get collaborations. One of those is Ethereum Towers, for example. The Bored Ape Yacht Club has purchased two entire floors, the World of Women as well, and small Web3 projects too. But it is also what you said. Let's wait for this project to deliver, and maybe the demand for this one is going to be higher. But it's just an example to see how these mining resources, the utility of a land, the collaborations, and other ones are going to be relevant when evaluating the lands in, I don't know, like next year. But also considering like it's not something that can be built from night to day. Um, okay, good. So I think we can make a pause here to see if anyone from the audience has any question or comment that want to ask Rob or me. Feel free to shoot. In the meantime, why, Rob, don't you tell us more about which tools do virtual worlds or metaverse platforms enable to their users to build these experiences? Because, for example, the Sandbox has its own voxel tool. I think Decentraland has a better version of it, and so on. Which tools are you familiar with, and what's the true meaning of having tools that allow you to build easily and smoothly?
Yeah, absolutely. Like using tools, like everybody who owns land in a metaverse world, be it the Sandbox or CryptoVoxels, Decentraland, Somnium Space, NFT worlds, World Wide Web, it doesn't matter. They need to interact with a piece of software to be able to customize their land, to create a building or a monument or maybe a game. And depending on which virtual world you're interacting with, there are different tools available. Each of them has their own. I think like some of them are easy, others are hard. Some are standalone. Some use standalone software. Others use a web interface. For example, the Sandbox, as you mentioned, they have two tools. One is called Vox Edit. It's free,
Mhm.
and it allows you to create characters. They supply various templates, allowing you to basically color a character, and that way you could create your own characters that you maybe want to use in a game, or you want to sell them on a marketplace. If you want to make a game in the sandbox, you need to download another tool. It's called Game Maker, and that one is, if you're familiar with game design and with making games, it's actually quite easy. It allows you to set rules for all kinds of objects on your land. So you can say, this object serves as a price. If you pick it, then something happens. What happens? An enemy spawns, or maybe when you pick it up, you win the game. So you can
Yeah.
set all kinds of rules for specific objects and create your own game that way. So that's very interesting. It's very so I'm not going to say it's easy, because it's still game design and it still requires lots of creativity. But compared to programming computer code, it's actually very easy.
Yeah.
Then looking at other ones like Somnium Space allows you to incorporate 3D models. So it's a lot more technical. But if you are familiar with Blender, you can create your own avatars and import them into Somnium Space. Somnium also has their own editor to create your own buildings. Also, here you can also import various models and various designs, similar to Decentraland. The two that I want to address specifically for people who are new to, let's call it, world design. Like World Wide Web has a very, very simple web interface. It's literally click and drop pieces of wall and floor. Of course, it's 2D.
It's more designing than building, right?
Yes, it's really more designing, and like everybody in this audience is of course familiar with Minecraft. Some of us might even have grown up with it. If you're familiar with Minecraft and you like playing it, then check out NFT Worlds. Buying land right now is kind of pricey. I think it's like 8 ETH or something for floor price. So it is kind of hefty, but it's you can also rent land, by the way, but that's not a story. But NFT Worlds is built upon Minecraft, and it allows you to use the Minecraft editor to create your world. So that's very sweet. It's anybody who played Minecraft knows exactly what they need to do to build something. And what's very cool, what I like a lot, they also have a more complicated side of things. They also allow programming within that Minecraft world.